Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in today's video we are going to look at this fantastic wilderness survival blade from the company REIFF Knives. Now this here is the F6, the largest knife in REIFF Knives lineup to date. A beautiful, just heavy duty chunk of 3V, just fantastically sculpted handles and a really nice package when you look at it in totality with its sheath, the way it came boxed up, and everything this knife has to offer. Now at this point I have produced an initial look and impressions video of this knife, as well as the F4 and F3. So if you want to see some more details and what this looked like before I used it, do me a favor and check out one of my prior videos. But today what we're going to do, we're going to get a closer look at the F6 specifically. I want to show you this in a little bit of detail before I put it to hard use, and well, at this point you can see it has been well loved. I've put this to some practical use for my given needs, and I'm going to talk to you about all of that very soon. And so when we get back, again, I'm going to show you this in a little more detail, and then we're going to get out for the field use. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you, and if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at REIFF Knives who did provide this for review. And so now as we get into the REIFF Knives F6, this is a Leuku style survival knife having a modern take on a classic Scandinavian design, with a 6-inch blade made of 3/16" thick stock of CPM 3V steel. This is a fantastic offering from REIFF Knives. Now, before we got too far into this actual testing, I did want to take a good quality close-up look at this knife. So you can see here, I'm kind of getting it, and I'm not going to say exactly under the microscope, but extremely, extremely close up. Looking at the overall details, the quality of the steel, and all the way down to the cutting edge, the square spine, and all of the details about this knife. So here you can see I am taking a look at the spine. This is the spine of the knife, and you'll notice it's not exactly a 90-degree square edge. I kind of wanted to take a look at this in a little bit of detail up front so that we could get a comparison of this once I'm done with all of the field use testing and working my way down the spine of the knife all the way to the tip. Here you can see the tip of the knife as it comes to a fine point. But overall, you can definitely see the 3V steel, a fantastic cutting edge. This knife is beautifully made right off the get-go. I am blown away at the overall quality, but take note of the edge all the way down to the fine edge on the cutting edge. This here with the secondary bevel V grind being perfect all the way down to that edge. And as I mentioned, I did want to test this. So you'll see by the end of this review, we do get all the way back to looking at this again for a second time. And I'm going to preface this entire thing by saying this knife handled beautifully. It held up beautifully, and it performed absolutely wonderfully. So again, as we get a close look at this up front, it's really just to sort of benchmark things, and taking a real super close look here, you can see that refined cutting edge, just a very fine edge and very well done from the factory. So with that, at this point, we can turn it around to the field use. Now, I've said this in the past on other reviews, so if you've been watching my channel, you probably realize that I do absolutely love using my wilderness survival blades in the kitchen. Bottom line is, for me, I definitely spend much more time surviving in the kitchen than I do out in the wilderness. And so for me, I really do enjoy using my survival wilderness blades in the kitchen. If you don't use your survival knives for kitchen tasks, quite frankly, I believe you're leaving them just well short of what they're capable of doing, and just quite frankly, not enjoying your knives to the maximum potential. And so for me, I do love using my survival blades in the kitchen. It just enhances my experience and kind of makes me a little bit excited to cook. But here you can see the Leuku doing a fantastic job. Now, The F6 Leuku, again, that is sort of like that traditional style, traditional knife. And you can see here the ability to use this and leverage it nicely in the kitchen. I definitely want something that's going to handle well, be nice and sharp and slicey, and the F6 will absolutely do that. And you'll see here, cutting through green peppers. Green peppers can be funny. I like this as a general test because if a knife has a good, sharp, and keen edge, it will actually slice through the pepper rather than it just simply crunching and crushing the pepper beneath the blade. Green peppers especially will just simply snap, and you can see here a nice, clean, just slicey edge. Now, this F6 does have, I guess what I would say, a subtle hollow grind. And actually, if you look at their website, they also say that themselves. It's not a real heavy hollow grind. It's somewhere in between a flat grind and a hollow grind on your primary bevel. But having that hollow nature definitely aids in sliceability, and especially where this is a 3/16 inch thick stock. That is a little bit stout, and knives with that thick a stock and what I would say is a mid-height saber grind can sometimes not be quite as slicey. That's the other thing about this F6. As you take a look at the actual saber grind, the saber grind is about a 50% height saber grind, so a little less slicey than other knives that might have a higher saber grind. Yet, REIFF did a nice job combating that by adding that subtle hollow grind. So you get the nature of both the durability, that stoutness, and you'll see the actual splitting capability, yet the slicing capability when you need it. And so in the kitchen, fantastic. And after a ton of different vegetables, a number of different tasks, a lot of different sort of prep, you can see this did perform extremely well on all these different little tasks. And the other thing worth noting is 3V can definitely rust, so you want to be careful. This does have a nice acid wash on it to help protect it, but you definitely need to be a little bit careful. And so after all of this use, you can see this cleaned up very well, and I can tell you that the F6 absolutely found a place in my kitchen cutlery knife block amongst some of my other favorite survival blades. So I'm out here today at Bushcraft Wonderland. I didn't necessarily intend on really working on the shelter, but when I got here, I realized I had to make some repairs. And unfortunately, if I don't do that, I'm a little worried about the integrity of the shelter and what I'm going to find the next time I come out here. So in order for me to do that, I need to get some wood to length. This F6 is going to be critical in my ability to do that. And so as I turn the corner here, I absolutely have to rely on my survival wilderness blades to help me with the chopping tasks. I gotta get all the knots and pokers out of here, otherwise that's gonna go right through the tarp. And here, as I'm out at Bushcraft Wonderland, I really didn't have the tools I needed to get me started, so the F6 was instrumental in my ability to actually just make some very simple and basic repairs to my shelter. A little bit of a tendency without a lanyard to want to come out of my hand just a little bit. This does not have an overly pronounced pommel end with a big flare or beak, which is going to aid in comfort, but you definitely need to keep an eye on your grip. So a little bit of re-gripping here, not a big deal, but just something worth noting. And so something I can definitely recommend with the F6. Nice bite right through. I do think pinky lanyards are very handy and can definitely aid in chopping. Looks to be some fat wood right there. It's a nice little chunk. I should save that. Yeah, that too. The overall capability of the F6, definitely fantastic, but it does have a little bit of a tendency to slide out of your hands, so adding a little bit of a pinky lanyard on this model would definitely be helpful. It's enough just to get that out of the way. Now, the piece I need has to be about 5 feet. So I got a 6-foot wingspan here. Come back about a foot, a little less. Better off a little bit long. Chopping right about here. Nice deep bite. But getting this F6 to some good chopping tasks, here you can see I need to get this log to length. And again, with an inferior knife, this definitely would not be so easy, but the F6 just doing a wonderful job making it down and through the wood with ease, taking nice healthy chunks and doing a mighty nice job. And as I mentioned, a little tendency to want to come out of my hands. Again, not a big deal. This does have a tendency to slide just a little bit, but going back to my point, that's where you add that pinky lanyard. But that's usually about as far as you need to go with your survival knives. This isn't a chopper. 6-inch survival knife, you don't need to go all the way through. Just enough to break that off. But in terms of the chopping capability, very good. And so all in all, the F6 again was absolutely instrumental in my ability to make some basic repairs to my shelter. Now, as you can see here, there was some pretty hard wood. What I like about this, the fact that with these chopping tasks, you absolutely stress on the blade. You stress on the belly. You're really at this point whacking down as hard as you can on hard knots, hard wood. And even though this looked a little bit punky on the outside, I can tell you this is way harder than you would think. This wood was almost petrified at this point. And this is a real good test for the overall quality of the steel, the heat treat, and to see by the end how this 3V will hold up in overall edge retention. And I couldn't even snap this thing. That's how hard this branch was. And again, back to one of my original points, well, my wilderness survival blades absolutely have to be able to do a little bit of food prep. So as I was making my way through my day, needing a little bit of food, a little bit of a snack, again, the F6 instrumental in my ability not only to work on my shelter, but get myself a little bit of a snack when I needed it. And that's what I'm saying about these survival blades. They have to be able to do the hard work and the fine tasks too. Now turning the corner here into some work at my house, my survival blades absolutely have to be able to process a fire from the beginning to the end. And that's everything from splitting the wood down from the larger pieces all the way down to the fine wood. And this is a great test for this F6 to see if it's going to be able to handle this. And well, guess what? Right away on the batoning tasks, absolutely awesome. You can see doing a wonderful job. And once I got a little bit of technique here, bam, slamming down into the wood and just blowing it apart. You can see I kind of used a little bit of what I would say is an axe technique, where as you wail down on the actual spine of the knife, you twist it just a touch at that moment of impact and it blows the wood apart and does a fantastic job. Now you can see I am basically stressing on the blade all the way down by the ricasso. Now we're going to look at this later on in detail to see the overall quality of the steel and how it held up after all of this hard use testing. But piece after piece after piece, you can see just doing such a wonderful job on the batoning tasks. Now it's one thing when you have straight grain like that oak, but what about this gnarly, nasty, twisted piece of maple? You can see here, this is not going to go well for this knife. And again, trying to stress on the knife, really give it as hard a time as I possibly can and test the overall quality of the knife all the way through the entire manufacturing process. So the first thing, again, the 3V. Let's talk about this. We have a 3/16 of an inch thick stock going into that mid-height saber grind. It should do a nice job wedging the wood, but when you go down into knots like this that are just so gnarly, so twisted, and so just dense, there is not a lot you can do. And you can see not only wailing on the knife, but on the handles. That's another thing about testing the overall quality of the construction. The G10, the overall fitment, and the tolerances that actually require holding this knife together, you can see here just stressing on this every possible way. And as I continue to slam on the knife time and time and time again, at this point, I don't have much in the way of the spine, but the tip, wailing on the tip of the knife time and time and time again. If I was going to see damage to a blade, this is a fantastic way to damage a knife. So here again, wailing on this. It's about as stuck as you can get a knife, literally.
I mean, that is so in there. That's crazy.
And so as I continue to work my way through this, just trying to get the knife to go through the wood, again, there's not too much I can do other than just simply pound on this.
There's more shock translating through my baton into my baton hand than the knife into my support hand. But you can see that has entered the twisted grain really, really bound up right there.
And that's a critical point. Not a whole heck of a lot in the way of shock in the handle.
And of course, wrapping on the handles, that's going to test the overall construction quality, but so far, so good.
And so making every attempt that I can to get this down and through the wood, really at this point, I'm kind of just literally beating on the knife. There is no way this is going to go down and through this twisted grain. It's literally pounding down and through that branch area. You can see it's a big, heavy-duty knot. This wood just does not want to blow apart. So again, stressing the knife to the best of my ability. This is really, truly a testament to the quality of REIFF knives in general, but most specifically, this F6. And you can start to see at this point, I'm starting to develop a little bit of a curve in that steel.
Oh, I don't know.
And with inferior knives, I have definitely not only bent them, but broke them as well at this point. So again, I cannot overstate the fact that this is a real, true, and heavy-duty test for this F6.
The steel has absolutely flexed over, without a doubt. You can see it is definitely flexed over, and I don't know if that's gonna pop. I mean, I got it close, but it just doesn't want to go.
And so at some point you need to call it and you have to get your knife back out of the wood. This is completely unorthodox.
Batoning onto the edge.
But at the same time, the only way I could get this out, hammer it back out, literally hammering on the cutting edge. That, my friends, is a test of this steel.
And I did manage to get it back out. But man, if there's anything gonna stress a knife, that right there did it. Nice full palm swell, filling out my hands nicely. Should be an epic carver. Let's see how it goes.
Now you'll notice a lot of times in my knife testing, I go from the heaviest duty tasks to the lightest duty tasks. Unfortunately for me, I don't often get the benefit of a nice, fresh, keen edge right out of the box going straight into the slicing tasks. That's really, I guess, most of the time when I'm carving myself out a baton or something like that. So you can see at this point, my very first tasks right out of the gate were pretty tough on this knife when it comes down to carving on the wood. But now, even after all of that use, this edge is phenomenal. Extremely sharp, doing a wonderful job, and you can see just doing a marvelous job carving down through the wood and getting very nice healthy chunks. This is going to be absolutely instrumental in my ability to sustain my fire. So I typically, again, process from the biggest to the smallest. So here you can see getting myself some nice kindling, which will be sort of that mid-sized stuff to really get my fire sustained when I get things started.
Generally feels real good in the hands. Nice and rounded out. Now this is a hard wood, so it's going to be a little bit stubborn, but as you can see, doing a nice job. And once I sort of find my edge, planning down and through the wood, nice edge geometry, that subtle hollow grind, really going to do a nice job. And with the angle on the 3V on that secondary bevel, real easy to find the edge.
And that really is where this knife shines. Not only the fit and finish, but the overall quality, the comfort in the hands, and the ability now to get to work for prolonged periods of time. Now you'll notice that I do a whole bunch of different carving tasks for different reasons, because the knife is going to behave differently on each type of wood, on each type of carving task. So not just getting those nice large chunks, but also here, the finer curls. That is another instrumental piece of my fire prep practice. So getting those very fine little curls, this is going to help start the fire. And you can see doing a nice job. Now, inferior knives can definitely struggle in these tasks, and this REIFF F6 doing a fantastic job. So again, not just those larger chunks, but here, getting some finer curls. And maybe they're not staying stuck to this piece of wood, but they're falling into a pile where I'll definitely be able to leverage them.
And if you see how tasty these little curls are, even on a hard wood, really, really nice. And that's awesome.
And carving for prolonged periods of time. How long can I go until I start to develop really hot spots in the hand or something that's going to bother me? And if you're in adverse conditions, maybe it's wet, maybe it's snowy, that is when it really matters, and you have to process a ton of wood to get yourself down to the dry stuff to actually start and sustain your fire.
And that should be more than enough material to help get my fire started. Fuel, check. Kindling, check. But what about that tinder? Spine is a little bit sharpened, but at the same time, I'd say mostly rounded out. You do have the ability to get an alternate grip on the side of the knife. Let's try it for those scraping tasks.
And so again, my wilderness survival blades have to be able to do everything to process my fire. So not just those larger chunks of wood, not just the fuel, but I have to be able to get all of my kindling, and equally important, all the way down to my tinder source.
And right away, I'm gonna say, surprisingly effective. And especially given how somewhat rounded over that spine is, they managed to find the perfect balance between square and capable of striking and scraping, yet softened to where it doesn't hurt your thumb. Really nicely done.
And so as I continue to process down all the fine little fuzz and fluff, you can see here with that alternate grip, holding the knife to the side, getting a nice positive grip, the thumb on the side of the blade, and again, this doing a wonderful job with the scraping tasks. I was really surprised, did not see this coming, and when I was originally looking at this under the microscope, I thought this task was going to struggle, but no problem. And what about those stabbing tasks? Again, my survival wilderness blades have to be able to do all of these different tasks effectively. And stabbing does a few different things. First and foremost, it helps me process down the wood very effectively. And with this, it has a reasonable guard, so I did not feel terribly concerned that my hand was going to slip. Between that and the positive grip on the palm swell, doing a pretty good job overall. But the second thing, with the stabbing tasks, absolutely stressing on the tip of the knife. And you can see slamming on this time and time again, doing a little more chopping, processing everything down, getting my chunks of wood into more appropriate kindling size pieces for my wood stove. You can see here the F6 instrumental in my ability to do all of this. And you don't always have to chop all the way through. You just have to get a nice deep bite and the ability to snap the pieces. And this is, again, doing a wonderful job. So comfortable in the hands and extremely effective. Very nice. Just getting to a little bit more fine tinder source here. You can see getting a little bit of a nest started, so just some grasses. Again, the F6 edge after all of this work, nice and sharp, capable of cutting through this with ease. And after all of this, I definitely like to get myself some fat wood. Now you'll notice on most of my survival blades, I do test on fat wood for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, fat wood is funny. Some knives really do struggle to carve on the fat wood. Sometimes they slide and glide and skate over the surface, and knives can be extremely ineffective. But here, the F6, and especially with that subtle hollow grind, doing a wonderful job carving. And we've already tested the spine, Again, doing a great job with the scraping tasks. I really didn't see this coming. So at this point, the F6 is leaving a wonderful impression on me for the overall capabilities to do all of the work you need to as a survival knife, and that's critical. So even getting all that nice fine fuzz off of the fat wood, fantastic. And just some last little pieces here. You can see this is a technique that I like to use. Don't need to fully baton, but just taking some pieces of fat wood, splitting them down to size, getting them ready and prepared for the fire. Easy, no problem. And the fact too here, you can see my ferro rod fitting nicely on the sheath, getting everything where I need it to, leveraging the spine of the knife for the striking on the ferro rod. Again, very effective. Getting some chunks of the ferro rod down and into the pile to help me get this lit, no problem. And then it really did not take much. Just a couple quick little strikes. Boom, here's my fire. No problem. And one last final thing, the length on the F6 is really handy for generally managing your fire. So all in all, everything about this F6, awesome. Awesome. I love it. A great knife. The ability to leverage this in all different scenarios, from food prep to chopping, the splitting and batoning, the carving, and all the way to the scraping tasks, extremely effective. So the F6 from REIFF Knives, absolutely phenomenal. I love it.
And so, all right, guys, there you have it. A closer look at the F6. But we're not quite done getting into detail. At this point, as you can see, well loved, well used. You watch the footage, beat on this pretty good, and I'm curious, what does this edge now look like, you know, under the microscope? And again, not really so much a microscope, but really close up. So let's turn the camera around and get a closer look. And so at this point, I have washed the knife, literally just some soap and water. That's it. No other touch-up or anything of the sorts. I really do want to see how everything held up. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the finish. So here you can see the original finish is kind of like I think it's like an acid stone wash. But on the 3V here, extremely durable. It is held up phenomenally well. So as you take a look at the finish on both sides, I mean, is there indications of use and, you know, wear and pounding through the wood? Of course. Is there some staining? Yep, a little bit. But as we look down at the secondary bevel, nice and shiny still. So no corrosion or anything worth noting. And then on this side of the blade, maybe just a little bit of staining. You can see right around here, just a little bit, not too big of a deal. And I bet you a lot of this even cleans up with some oil. That's probably some residue. And of course, I was also carving fat wood and feeling that it does feel like resin. That's just a little bit sticky there. So I feel like that's just some resin from the fat wood that would clean up over time, or with just a little bit of oil. Looking at the spine, of course, that did a whole bunch of scraping. And you can see it is kind of shiny on this edge here, just a little bit. On this side, not so much, but on this side, maybe a little bit. Not too big of a deal, though. I mean, nothing worth really noting. Maybe just a little bit of sap there, which again would come off, you know, that resin from the fat wood. So again, not a big deal. Now, let's start to talk about the handles, because I was wailing on those handles to get the knife out. And these are equally flush as to how they were in the first place. Again, go back to my original video where I covered this in just a preliminary look and talked about fit and finish. It is still spot on. And when I say spot on, legitimately spot on. No notable damage to the G10. Maybe a couple marks where maybe I bashed on it, but nothing really worth noting. So very well done from a durability perspective on the handle. Now, one place where I would really start to wonder is on the spine. Do I have any sort of bending or curving or anything like that? And what about the tip? So to me, and this is always very subtle and generally very hard to see, but sighting down the blade, there is no notable warping, twisting, bending. As I look at the tip, I can almost always talk myself into seeing a little bit of tip damage. I would say, if maybe at all, if it was slightly kicked to the right, maybe a touch. But again, I usually can talk myself into tip damage, but I don't really know. I can't say for certain, but if anything, I would say maybe the tip is just so subtly kicked to the right, but nothing that's going to impact performance, that's for sure. Now, where the rubber really hits the road is on that secondary bevel. Let's take a look at this close up. So with the naked eye, no notable damage, maybe a little bit of residue, but as you look at it, I mean, seemingly perfect. I don't see any notable chips, rolls, dings, dents, divots, wobbles, wiggles, nothing. So far, really good. And now again, under the microscope, as we take a close look, yeah, there's some lint from me, like, cleaning off the blade. As we look real close, now I'm going towards the back of the blade, so all the way up against the ricasso. But this is where I was absolutely wailing on the blade to try to chunk out that wood and literally just get it to blow out. And as we continue to move along the blade, no notable damage. Couple little tiny, like, microscopic chips. I mean, that's totally going to come out with a strop or a fine ceramic rod. And as we work our way along the entire edge, I'm going to check the entire thing. Oh, another little strand from cleaning cloth. Again, no notable damage. Very straightforward here. Still seemingly looking very sharp. Getting very close to the belly. So now as we work along the belly of the blade, this is where I would expect with the chopping to see some chips or rolls or damage, but nothing at all worth noting. Again, very, very good. Nice and refined edge. And as we turn the corner here, working our way up towards the tip, you can see there's a little residue. That's actually from washing the blade. So that's just like water stains. Again, looking really good. And as we get right up to the tip, that fine little tip there, no worries. Everything seemingly perfect. And as we look at the edge, on edge, this is literally looking at it on edge, like I'm slicing the lens. Look at how perfect and straight this is. No wavering, no wandering. Really, really nicely done. Phenomenal. And so again, what a just super nicely done and impressive package from REIFF Knives. The F6, just a beast. This chunk of 3V, but machined, massaged, and just made into a badass blade. Fantastic work. So a great design. If I had to be nitpicky, where would I be? I mean, you saw the carving capability, that semi-hollow grind doing a wonderful job, the stout, tip and its ability just to stab, the batoning, fantastic. The carving capability was there. The comfort in the hand during the carving, no problem. Not a lot of shock in the handle. The one place where it leaves it just a little bit lacking for me, the chopping, and that's without a lanyard. If you were to put a pinky lanyard on here or a lanyard wrapped around your hand for those chopping tasks, no problem. But where it is here, not too much in the way of a hook, not too much in the way of a flare, and this does have a tendency to want to fly out of your hands. But you can't always get it all, and you get so much with this knife that I really can't complain. And couple all of that with the sheath, a fantastic ride, wonderful carry.
great kydex, nice fit, well formed, plenty of lashing points, the ability to put your ferro rod, decent clip, all things considered, and the fact that it rotates is awesome. So all in, I'm a big fan. So again, to the people at REIFF Knives, thank you very much for providing this for review. And for the rest of you, if you like this content, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless 2 channel, which is more on the tactical and firearm side of things. At this point, that channel is growing quickly. I have a ton of videos up there, so if you like what you see here on Outer Limitless, do me a favor and check me out on Outer Limitless 2. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.